Hey everybody, just a heads up that this episode features some cursing, so keep that in mind and enjoy the episode.
X-Men, get it!
Hey everyone, and welcome to another exciting episode of Battle of the Atom. This is your weekly X-Men podcast where we rank every story from A to Z. I'm Zack, and Adam doesn't seem to be around, but Cerebro's Connor Goldsmith, what are you doing here?
Oh my goodness, Zack. I just thought that on this fine Thursday? It's a Thursday.
It's a
on
Thursday
this fine
now.
Thursday evening, I might spend a little time with you. I've lost track now of the days of the week because I'm back to work, and it was kind of a rude awakening when I opened my email inbox and I was like, oh, right, I have a job that I have to do. So I've just kind of been buried, but I was excited to do this because we've been talking about this one for a while.
We have been. In the past, we've done some episodes that have been up your alley in terms of things that you have talked about on your podcast.
You've reached
Cerebro.
out about characters you know I like. So we talked about Emma, we talked about Betsy and Kanan. It has been a logical, character-focused progression, but this is going to be a little different.
Yeah, we went the complete opposite direction here and said, wait, what don't you talk about on Cerebro, the X-Men podcast for people who don't know that you host? It's a great show, goes real deep into characters. I think the latest one that's come out is a 4.5 hour episode about Jubilation Lee with Jason Liu, which is Jason Lowe, excuse me.
No, he never used to care, but during COVID, he was like, I'm going to tell everyone how it should be pronounced. It is pronounced Lowe, even though it's Loo. I said it wrong about 700 times on the podcast and apologized to him at the beginning of the Jubilee episode. And he was like, it's totally fine. You are far from the first person to make that mistake.
Well, I'm glad I'm in good company in making that mistake. But no, it's a great show. People should go check that out if they are interested in this. But you mostly focus on character histories, which tend to be in one universe.
Yeah, my show focuses on Earth 616, as I call it, stubbornly.
Very
the
stubbornly.
Prime Marvel Earth, and that's because, quite honestly, it becomes too sprawling if I start to incorporate alternate realities and things like that. The only exception has been occasionally I do need to talk about Age of Apocalypse, because there are certain characters whose trajectories as characters in the 616 reality are impacted by the way that they were written in Age of Apocalypse. Hank McCoy is a great example. After the popularity of Dark Beast in the Age of Apocalypse, the question of could Hank McCoy become that person is something a lot of writers started to play with.
And yet no one asks if Cyclops could become a, fascist cop. No one brings up that question.
I would argue Brian Michael Bendis asked that question, actually.
I would argue that Brian Michael Bendis asked that question and then said, no, he wouldn't.
Well, right. But it was, I do feel like the rogue revolutionary X-Men thing that Bendis did was informed a little bit by the Scott and Emma of Age of Apocalypse, actually.
That is an interesting take, and one that I have not thought of, largely because I came back into comics really with that run. So it was a fresh thing for me, and I wasn't thinking of the past at the time.
It's not something I would have thought about until you just said that, and now I'm like, because I don't think about Age of Apocalypse that much, but now I'm kind of tinkering with it. And, the Battle of the Atom storyline with all the time travel is not unlike Age of Apocalypse in certain ways also. So I think that there's, Days of Future Past is the big X-Men time travel story, but then Age of Apocalypse is the other big dystopian X-Men story, and I think that they both loom super large over pretty much every other story in that vein that X-Men does, be it Cable's timeline or Bishop's timeline or whatever else.
Yeah, they are the example. I mean, just you knew what Age of Apocalypse was. It was a big deal when it was coming out. It kept echoing throughout the franchise ever since. And it's got those very good 90s designs that
everybody looks really cool. Except the people who look really stupid. But like even the people who look really stupid kind of look cool also. Like, does Magneto have ridiculous hair?
Oh,
yes.
Ridiculous. I love it though.
But does that sort of predict Joseph in an interesting way?
150%.
Like, that's the thing. There's a lot of stuff here that then bleeds into the real reality, not even to get into, of course, your beloved Nate Gray, the immigrant from one reality to the next, or the Dark Beast and the Sugar Man, who both make it through. Holocaust briefly pops in, or Blink, who becomes the lead of Exiles because she was so popular in Age of Apocalypse.
It's hard to understate the impact that Age of Apocalypse had. It was, in a lot of ways, the last bastion of like the big 90s X-Men before things go pretty far off the rails.
I think it's the last time that X-Men is genuinely like good until Grant Morrison. And that's not to say that there aren't good moments in Siegel and Kelly. That's not to say that there aren't a couple late 90s stories that I like, but
it's a mess.
It's a huge fucking mess. I'm sorry. I just remembered I can't swear on your podcast. But
you're going to make Adam hit the bleep button on the edit on this?
He bleeped me on tits the first time I was on this show.
No, I bleeped you on tits the first time you were on this show.
Well, I still think that was a little excessive. You can say tits on network television.
Can you? I don't watch network television. I don't know.
Well, I'm just saying, if you turn on NCIS, I guarantee they can say tits on it in prime time.
Is NCIS still going on?
I've never seen an episode, but my understanding is yes.
Oh, what? Good for that one goth chick.
I don't think she's on it anymore. Polly Perrette, the world's oldest goth, is no longer on. That's what Julie Klausner calls her, because they got into a feud on Twitter once.
That is both very funny and also the only NCIS character I know. Who would have thought a Jag spinoff was going to do so well?
I know. Justice for Catherine Bell. When does Jag get a revival? Anyway,
unfortunately, this is not
a Jag podcast.
It is not. It is a podcast where we're going to talk about all the Age of Apocalypse stories that we haven't talked about yet. We are finishing up the main stories.
Oh no. Yeah, not all of them.
I said main. I said main. We haven't done Chronicles.
We're not doing Kirika. I'm not doing that.
Oh,
stuff.
We've already done that. We've already done.
Good. God bless you.
Oh, listen. Unlike you, I have some fond thoughts about parts of Uncanny X-Force, so I enjoy some of that content.
I like the Apocalypse Solution, or whatever it's called, the first arc.
Yeah.
That one's fine.
There's a lot. Again, we're not talking about that story. We're going to start by talking about Factor X. This was written by John Francis Moore with pencils and art by Steve Epting and Terry Dodson. Al Milgram jumps in there. This was the book spinning, or what X Factor became.
Yes, and it's Glynis Oliver, the goat, is on colors for this, I should note, which I sometimes don't even realize that she was doing colors into the 90s, but she was.
Listen, more power to Glynis Oliver for literally everything. Underrated in terms of her impact.
People don't think about colorists, particularly in old comics. They just don't think about it. But she is just as much a part of that classic Claremont and Byrne look as John Burton himself,
Right. So Factor X is a weird one because this is, X Factor was the government team. Factor X also
is the government team, but it's Apocalypse's evil government.
It's somehow making the U.S. government seem like the wise, sensible choice to work for in comparison.
The thing that's really weird about it is, so for people who aren't familiar, Age of Apocalypse is a storyline in 1995 where the whole line got canceled abruptly, and every writer who was on one of the X-Men titles, of which at this point there were many, wrote a 4-issue miniseries that had a similar but different title, and that was set in this alternate dystopian Earth where Charles Xavier was murdered before he could start the X-Men, which compelled Magneto to start the X-Men in his place. And because of the butterfly effect of that, Apocalypse has risen to power and become an absolute dictator, exterminating humans in America. He rules the whole country.
This is not the Apocalypse from Ten of Swords that people like. This is
right.
This is other guy.
And he's barely in it. He really is just the bad guy.
He's an idea in Age of Apocalypse.
Yeah.
He's a small factor in one of the books. That's it.
I mean, the thing about Apocalypse is that until Jonathan Hickman and Teenie Howard, he wasn't a good character. A good story, except for maybe that first one that Wheezy and Walt did.
Yeah,
which is mostly a good. I mean, that's a good Warren story more than he is
a character being drawn by Walt Simonson.
Yeah, that's going to be great. And he's cool looking, but like that's it really. And then he was just in a series of successively worse and worse stories for the next 25 years until suddenly Jonathan and Teenie made lemonade out of those lemons. But this is his high point. Otherwise, it's just
he
really just is a presence and an idea more than he is a character. He'll pop up occasionally to be like, "Oh, my minions," but like he doesn't do much.
He tries to capture a baby at one point.
Well, and but he's not very good at things generally. Like,
no.
And he has the most ineffectual horsemen in this time. I mean, not that they're more effective than the ones in our timeline, who always flop, but
half of his horsemen defect right as the story starts.
Yes, but not Gideon and Kandra, who are horsemen in this reality, because they were really trying to make Gideon and Kandra happen for a hot second. But it's in like the backstory, like Chronicles of Age of Apocalypse.
Because he has his horsemen, and then he has his other people that aren't horsemen, but are really like his 4 rulers. There's a lot of mess.
Because it's Abyss and Holocaust and Sinister
and Mikhail Rasputin.
But then it's also Sabretooth who defected.
Sabretooth defected at one point.
And Gideon and Kandra. I think that he had like 5 horsemen. It's really stupid because it's like, what titles did they each? I mean, maybe one was Conquest and one was Pestilence. Doesn't really matter. Don't worry about it, guys.
We're assuming a lot more thought.
We're now no-prizing a lot here that we don't need to no-prize. But yes, Factor X, what's weird about this one, to go back, is that John Francis Moore is on X Factor for a very, very brief period. This is after Peter David has left the book, but before Howard Mackey takes over the book. And there's a brief, weird period in the middle where it's like Lobdell and then DeMatteis and then John Francis Moore for like 10 issues, including Age of Apocalypse.
Right. And I tend to actually really like John Francis Moore in the 90s.
I do too. I think his stuff on X-Force is some of the best X-Men stuff in the 90s.
I love that. I am a sucker for 2099. I think it has a lot of really great ideas. It's got a lot of interesting concepts.
Sure. You're not wrong.
No, regardless, I enjoy a John Francis Moore comic. And I think this is very interesting.
2099 informs Age of Apocalypse also, right? Like a similar dystopian cyberpunk vibe.
It was in the air in the 90s. But this is about Sinister's enforcers, really. It's a bunch of families. So it's Cyclops and Havoc are the leaders. Aurora and Northstar, Cannonball and Amazon. We all know that
Lizzie Guthrie, who has never manifested her Amazon powers in the 616 reality, but I think she should.
At this point, she should just be walking around like, oh yeah, there's our tall sister.
There's Lizzie, remember her? And it's like, no, she only appeared in a Chuck Austin comic apart from Age of Apocalypse. So, she is in She Lies with Angels.
She's not the
that's
racist
Joelle. Joelle's not a mutant.
Right. I can't keep them all. There's too many Guthries. I'm from Kentucky. I can say this. Guys, too many kids. You did too many.
Condoms, Lucinda.
Listen, she was just doing as the Lord told her. And we also get the Bedlam brothers here.
Yes,
in
this
their
is the
first
introduction of the Bedlam brothers. In fact, King Bedlam, as he'll be known in the main reality, is called Terry Bedlam here rather than Christopher. And so I think the handbooks made him Christopher Terrence. Like to try and make it make sense.
That's my favorite way that they try and fix.
But it's the same writer, so I guess he just decided he didn't like Terry. Oh, maybe, you know what? I bet
Terry
it's because once he's in X-Force, Terry is Terry Rourke. Yeah.
Yeah. Can't do that. He's like, crap, now I gotta figure something
Shit,
else.
I didn't even think of that. Right.
So they are working through this, essentially capturing humans and rogue mutants, and putting them into terrible experiments for Dark Beast and Mr. Sinister.
Yeah, in the breeding pits.
It's not a great place to be for humans. It's
the breeding pits. No,
yeah,
not
it's pretty
ideal.
terrible.
The breeding pits is more for mutants. I think the kennel is where the humans are. When people do this, I just had this happen again to me on Twitter. Someone replied to me and was like, "Our Hank has become worse than Dark Beast." I'm like, okay, listen, our Hank is pretty bad, but he hasn't launched the breeding pits yet. So I do feel like Dark Beast is still ahead in the atrocities department.
Dark Beast gleefully does the worst stuff.
Hank's getting there, but again,
he's getting there. He's
breeding
getting there.
Pits is
he's
really
getting there with an idea of doing something good. Where Dark Beast is like, I love evil so much.
I love having a breeding pit. Yeah, no, and several of them, in fact, because it's plural. So,
in fact, it's at a point where Apocalypse is like, I don't even know why you have these things. I'm doing this as a favor for you.
He wants to shut them down because he's like, these aren't actually that useful to me. And Dark Beast is like, no, I want more horrible rape and murder in my rape and murder pit to be occurring forever. The thing that I guess is worth noting there too is that, like, as envisioned by the Simonsons, Apocalypse is totally a dark side riff, right? So this is very Apocalypse. Like, the way that the breeding pits and the kennels and all that function is very akin to Granny Goodness's stuff.
Apocalypse with a K.
Yes. Oh, I'm sorry. That was confusing.
Yes, we are in the age of... Yes, from the new gods.
Right, from the fourth
there came
world.
a day when the new gods died, or the old gods died. It's
right, and then the new gods were yada, 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 and, you know, the female furies and all of that. So it's kind of giving that. Factor X is mostly the book about Cyclops and Havoc.
It's interesting because Havoc just hates his brother so much from the jump.
Hates him.
Just comically hates him.
But it's because Sinister has raised them in this reality, both of them, from childhood. And as in our main reality, Sinister doesn't have any time for Havoc. That doesn't interest him. So instead, it's just been nothing but Scott being the favored child, which is not what happened in our reality, where Sinister just, you know, farmed Alex out to a foster family and focused in on Scott. Here, they're both together, but it's clear to Alex the whole time that he's irrelevant and Scott is the one who matters. So he's built up this huge well of resentment.
And even though Alex has a very privileged spot among mutants in this world, it's not as good as Scott's, who is in line to become a horseman, and he just hates it.
Right. They're prelates in the mutant elite force, but they're not of exactly the same rank, basically. And when Sinister betrays Apocalypse to pass information to Weapon X, Wolverine in this reality, and Jean Grey, it is Cyclops who is put into Sinister's position by Apocalypse once Sinister has fled. And that's all happened in X-Men Alpha, the prelude to Age of Apocalypse.
Right. Now, the interesting thing about this is, as we find out as the series goes along, Cyclops has decided he has had enough of atrocity and would like to do something better with his life for reasons that are... If this wasn't Cyclops, the hero of the X-Men, I think that it would not land as well, because I don't think the motivation for him is built in the short time they have as well as it could be.
The thing about this being 4 issues, each one of these titles, is that you have to just take a lot on faith. And with certain characters, this is kind of a tricky thing that we'll probably get to more in X-Calibre, which I love, but I know you have more mixed feelings about. Why is Danny Moonstar a full-on psychopath in X-Calibre, whereas Cyclops here is more like the Cyclops we know?
Yeah.
Because Cyclops is an important character in the 90s, in 1995, and Danny Moonstar is not particularly. And that's the answer to that question. So it is a situation where you start to see characters who matter more getting more leeway to have their original personality push through, even in this reality when it wouldn't super make sense. Like, why does Cyclops feel that he ought to help Jean Grey and ought to...
He just feels something.
He just does,
something.
You know?
He feels
You
like
can't
maybe in a different
explain
world, we could be different. And you know what? He rescues Jean. They start to free the breeding pits. And
God.
It's Age of Apocalypse is a lot.
Age of Apocalypse is a lot. It's really good, guys, if that's not clear. But like, it is... It's also like how we've just stopped listening to the comics code. How far can we push this fucking comic is sort of the vibe also.
When we talked about the main books, Amazing and Astonishing, we mentioned how those books actually balanced a lot with humor elements. You have Morph, who's a major character, who is a slapstick character on that. X Factor is just, or Factor X is all just dark and gritty, and you know, the most Warhammer something could be.
Yeah, there's no fun happening in Factor X. I mean, well, I guess there's Angel's Nightclub Heaven, where we got like some
they do a Casablanca.
Yeah, but it doesn't go well for anyone.
No.
Least of all, Havoc, who it turns out is having an affair with, and this is a truly insane pull.
Oh, Scarlett McKenzie?
The lounge singer at Heaven is Scarlett McKenzie from Havoc and Wolverine Meltdown.
Love it.
The nurse who was secretly a Soviet spy who died in that story, and Havoc had fallen in love with her, and it's right after Inferno, and Wolverine is like, he just went through the whole Madeline thing, so I'm just not going to tell him that she was evil, and they just move on with their lives. What's even weirder is that after this story, John Francis Moore has a storyline in like regular X Factor where Scarlett McKenzie is inexplicably back from the dead, but then Howard Mackie doesn't continue it, so it never...
I have no memory of that story.
She just exists out in the world now.
The Marvel Wiki is telling me that happened. There's only so much X Factor.
I was just looking at 90s X Factor because I am recording the Forge episode this week, so it's that's like the only book where he ever matters after Claremont, particularly. So it's just one of those weird books, in part because it changed hands so much. But yeah, so he's having an affair with Scarlett McKenzie, and over the course of Factor X, we discover that she is pregnant, which horrifies him because Apocalypse has a law against miscegenation between mutants and humans, and she's actually a spy for the Human High Council.
Right.
So that's unfortunate for Havoc because he really just wants to be in charge, and that's gonna... because Cyclops keeps fucking up because he is funneling refugees to Val Cooper, who shows up in a baseball cap and a cat suit to like ferry people.
To be fair, it's
river.
Cyclops. He's intentionally doing these things. He is sabotaging his own operation.
Yes, and
seeing no consequences for it.
Right, but eventually Havoc betrays him and is like, now I'm in charge, but the Scarlett McKenzie of it all presents a problem for Havoc because that's the law he's been breaking.
They get into a big fight, and then it's like, go read Omega.
Along the way is the very, very strange, in retrospect, Polaris story. Where
that weird one issue.
Well, it's the whole point is that in this reality, Polaris is psychotic and has a delusional belief that she is Magneto's daughter, but Dark Beast has been able to emphatically determine that she has no genetic relation to Magneto, because at the time, in the status quo of the 90s, that was the story.
She wasn't.
It doesn't make any
she
sense.
She wasn't
now.
Magneto's kid until Chuck Austen.
Chuck Austen
was like, no, actually, that 60 story, we're just going to say, yes, that was actually what happened.
To be fair, it's because Grant Morrison has her call him daddy on Genosha in that one issue of New X-Men.
We cannot expect Grant Morrison to pay attention to continuity.
And Grant Morrison hadn't read any X-Men comics between Dark Phoenix Saga and when Grant Morrison started writing X-Men. So the idea that Polaris's parentage was something that Grant should have kept track of. I mean, I was annoyed at the time because it was like, the whole point is she's not Magneto's daughter. But you know what? It all worked out for the best because it ended up helping her as a character to do that. Especially, I mean, we didn't know at the time that Magneto's other children were going to get retconned out.
No, so those seemed like those would be sure shots forever at the time.
It ended up, well, the whole thing in Age of Apocalypse is Wanda's tragic death.
Oh, yeah, Wanda's tragic death.
That's one of the big things that motivates Pietro's in the X-Men dating Storm.
Yeah, man, that one's weird.
Which is crazy.
That's Storm does not get the best in Age of Apocalypse.
No.
She doesn't get it bad. She's just there because she's Storm.
But the 90s is a terrible decade for Storm overall. Because she just gets outshined by Cyclops at every possible opportunity in a way that is super annoying, frankly.
It's a bad time for Storm.
Yeah, not a great decade. Claremont's gone and no one knows what to do with her.
Listen, she's living her best life now.
We
got Storm back. It took 30 years.
Took 30 years, and listen, all I can hope for my favorite characters is that Al Ewing gets to write them in something, because it goes a long way. But
it really does.
In any case, I mean, that's Factor X. What else is there really to say about Factor X? I'm looking at my notes.
I don't think there's much to say about it. And I think what we should do then, Connor, is we should probably rank it.
Yeah. Go ahead. Pull up your list.
I've got my list. It's a big list. What I'm going to do is I'm going to throw some titles at you and see how you feel about it, because we have 735 stories on this list where we are ranking all the X-Men stories from best to worst, with the best story being the House of X Powers of 10, number 100 being X Factor 1 through 6, The Longest Night, 200 being that Dracula issue of Uncanny X-Men from the Claremont, number 300 being Marvel Team Up 149, The Time Cannonball Goes to Buy a Hat, number 400 being Deadpool Volume 2, number 500 being the first appearance of Adam X the X-Treme, number 600 being Gen 13 Gen X, number 700 being Ages of Apocalypse, a story that is unrelated to all of this, and 735 is the Draco.
Right. Yeah, well, that makes sense.
We have some Age of Apocalypse stories higher. Like, this is better. I've said this is better than X-Man.
Sure. It's emphatically worse than Gen Next. Where is Gen Next ranked on your list?
Gen Next is like...
That's the best Age of Apocalypse 20. Mini, is what I'm saying. So, I'm just trying to gauge where you ranked that one.
No. Listen, I'm a Chris Bachalo guy. Gen Next is always going to be up there. I think we have that at 15.
Oh, okay, so that's really high.
I'm trying to see
where is Gambit and the Externals? That was my next question. Yeah.
Gambit and the Externals is down at 164, and I think Gambit and the Externals is better than this.
It is. But not by a huge percentage. But it is. You know what I mean?
How do you feel about this compared to something like the Omega Red issues of X-Men Volume 2, 4 through 7?
With is that with the Soul
with
Scanner
the basketball?
and Ilyana?
No, that's the
right.
And the first Omega Red appearance stuff.
Oh, right, with Fenris and Shinobi Shaw.
With the great design of Omega Red, and then also the story that's there.
This is better than that, I think.
Okay, we're getting.
Do you disagree?
No, I think that's about right.
Because the art in that Omega Red story is gorgeous, but incomprehensible. That's the one where they have to. Is that about the old Weapon X thing with like the doctor who they had to kill?
It's part of the time in 1991 where they're going through and everything is about Weapon X now.
And about Maverick. Like it's a big, we're pushing Maverick.
Yeah, it's the Maverick one.
Yeah, you know what? Actually, I think that's better than this one.
Okay, that tells me where I'm looking. How do you feel about this compared? Okay, this is not as good as number 220 on this list, Power Pack 19, where Power Pack hosts Thanksgiving with all the X-Men and Beta Ray Bill and Franklin Richards.
I have no strong opinions on the Thanksgiving Power Pack issue, so I will take your word for it.
You should. I feel like you would enjoy the Thanksgiving Power Pack.
I've read it. I just not in a very long time. You know I don't like kids.
You know what? Fair. I get it. I get that.
But there are Power Pack issues I love. I mean, I think that the Mutant Massacre issue of Power Pack is extraordinary. So, there's...
How do you feel about this compared to... Actually, I'm going to say a story that I know you don't like as much as I think I do, so that'll give us a good floor here.
Sure.
Phoenix Resurrection, The Return of Jean Grey.
I would read this 5,000 times before ever reading Phoenix Resurrection again.
Okay, this is not as good as Madripoor Nights.
No.
I don't think that this is as good as Kitty Pryde and Wolverine. That's at 242.
The OG Kitty Pryde and Wolverine? Yeah, it's not as good as that.
It's not as good as that. Another John Francis Moore. 251 is the start of the road trip era, where I think that's better than this.
That is better than this, yeah.
Is this better than Ultimate X-Men Return of the King?
No. Oh, no, I'm sorry. Wait, say that again. Is this better than?
Yes.
Yes, it is.
Okay, going down. X-Calibre 51, Don't Drink the Water. I believe that's the dinosaur one?
Yeah, that's better than this.
Okay, we have found the right spot then on this list. How do you feel about this compared to, this is a deep cut, Uncanny X-Men 353 to 355, the story with Sauron that Steve Siegel does for some reason?
I like the... man, that's tough. I just love Sauron content, so it's like I kind of prefer that one, but I think this is probably better.
Then it's going to go between those two stories. That's where it's at.
Okay.
AOA Factor X is our new 259. And we're going to jump
That's not bad out of like 800. That's pretty good.
It's pretty good. So the next one we're going to cover, I know, is one that kind of filters in and out of Factor X to an odd amount. It's Weapon X by Lethal Larry Hama and Adam Kubert. Are you a big Larry Hama Wolverine guy? I know you're not like the biggest Wolverine guy.
So here's the thing. I didn't read that much of it as a kid because, like Wolverine Solo was just not but I've read a ton of it now doing Cerebro, and I actually just reread a ton of it because I did the Jubilee episode where, most of her big character development was happening in that book more than in the main X-Men titles, frankly, until Generation X pulls her away. But here's what I will say. I think Larry Hama's Wolverine is about as good as a 90s solo Wolverine title could possibly be. Does that make sense?
Yes.
The one real problem I have with it is the fridging of Mariko Yoshida, which I think is egregious. And especially in Lourdes Chantel is the only one that Claremont does a story like that with, and it's a one-off. That character is introduced to die, which I do think
where Mariko Yoshida is a pretty...
Mariko is like an ongoing character who's been around since the 70s, and I think the way she's unceremoniously off to make Wolverine cry really sucks. That's my one real note about Larry Hama's Wolverine, where I'm like, that story I don't like. Pretty much everything else. I mean, like, am I a huge Albert and LCD stan? No, but like,
insane,
they're fine,
but go off.
I mean, I have no problem with them existing. Like, that's fine. I would say this is probably my favorite book called Weapon X. Besides, like, the Barry Windsor Smith Marvel Comics Presents, which was not published as something. It was like a story called Weapon X, but the book's not called Weapon X.
MCP, yeah. That's the most fair a thing could be.
Yeah.
I don't think
I mean,
anyone
like, the
can
Greg
dispute
Pak Weapon X is, like, fine. I love Greg Pak.
It's got
but
terrible art in it.
And also, it's inverted Sabretooth, which I just simply can't deal with. Like,
it's
the
also a book.
post-axis.
It's a book where William Stryker from God Loves Man Kills, 1, makes a deal with the devil, which is a weird thing. 2, makes a Hulk Wolverine.
Yeah, I hate any story where William Stryker returns after God Loves Man Kills. So, like, even Kyle and Yost's Decimation Young X-Men stuff is, like, not... to me, that's the best Academy X ever gets. I'm a noted Academy X non-fan.
I am so glad there's another one of us out there.
But
it was rough for a while.
I mean, I'm like, that arc where the bus blows up is the best that book ever gets. Sorry to the Academy X freaks. You know I love you. I just don't get it. But
DJ got what he deserved.
The real thing, though, is that the worst part of that whole arc is that Stryker's in it. Because I just don't think he works as, like, a recurring supervillain. God Loves Man Kills 2 in Extreme is terrible. And that Greg Pak Weapon X story is also not great.
William Stryker does not appear in this comic.
He doesn't. So we're way ahead of the game already. Also not appearing in this comic is any of the stuff from the Frank Thierry Weapon X, which Frank and I have become friendly, and there's a great picture of us on my Instagram with him flipping me the bird because I've talked so much shit about Weapon X on my podcast. And he's like, they wanted a villain book. I wrote a villain book. They wanted it to be dark. And boy, howdy was it.
Listen. You don't have to tell me twice. I think we have covered one Weapon X story on this podcast so far in the 6 years we've been doing it.
I can't blame you. I skip it almost every time I can. But like at some point I have to do Wild Child and Aurora, who are characters I haven't covered yet. And it's just going to be unfun. But anyway, this Weapon X, which is the first series titled Weapon X.
It's a lot more fun.
It's pretty good. I quite liked this. And it actually felt to me like my biggest note, as I said to Larry Hama, is you can't just like fridge Mariko Yoshida. And so Mariko Yoshida's all over this. And it feels almost like he regretted killing her off.
It is a book about Weapon X, who is the Logan of this universe. There's a different character named Wolverine that's unrelated to all of this, very confusingly.
But don't worry about that at all.
No, we are not covering X-Men Chronicles on this.
No, we're sure not.
But he and his living girlfriend, Jean Grey, are working with the Human High Council to figure out, how do they deal with a problem like Apocalypse?
Right. So to explain what that is, I'm sorry, I by nature have to do this. I have to contextualize things. I can't help myself. But so the Human High Council are the body in Europe, which is now Eurasia, that has formed to unite humankind against Apocalypse, who's conquered America and made this mutant fascist state. It is led by a fascinating group of characters. It's Brian Braddock. No mention is ever made of Betsy, which is interesting
the entirety of the original AOA.
Right, because all the telepaths were killed by Apocalypse is something we're told very early on. So that's but it's never mentioned. So Brian's here. Moira McTaggart is here, but she's Moira McTaggart Trask, married to Bolivar Trask. Brian is funding the production of the Trask Sentinels, which are humanity's last defense against Apocalypse. And the other two members of the Human High Council are Mariko Yoshida, who's representing basically East Asia's interests in the council, and Emma Frost, who has lobotomized herself to remove her telepathy so that she counts as a human. And to protect herself from the Shadow King.
Rules. I love that idea for Emma. That is
I like that
great.
The way it's drawn by Kubert in this is that she has half of her head is just bald, and there's a scar in the shape of an X where she took out her mutant power, which is wild. It's just like a wild choice, and this is right at the start, basically, of Gen X. Like, we're not far
the book
into
had
Gen
4
X.
issues.
So she is a character we know more as a villain. So when we are in Age of Apocalypse and we see her here, we're like, oh, okay, Emma and Bolivar Trask. And we're like, and Brian Braddock and Mariko Yoshida and Moira. Like, it's a very, because for newer readers, the idea of Moira McTaggart being a bad guy was pretty shocking.
Moira would never gaslight and then wear her boyfriend as a human skin suit.
Right. Moira would never
in 1995.
Moira would never betray all she ever knew in an attempt to ascend to the phalanx and become one with the universe. That's just not a thing she would do, right? So here it's shocking that she's married to Bolivar Trask, but also what's shocking is that in this reality, Bolivar Trask is got a point. Like the Human High Council are good guys here, which is twisted, but they're
the
good
Sentinels
guys.
do seem very rational at this point.
But they're also good guys who have decided that the nuclear option literally is the way to go. Jean and Weapon X are working as mutant operatives of the Human High Council because they quit the X-Men after Magneto refused to launch a mission to rescue Jean from the breeding pits, which is where Jean's DNA was harvested to create Nate Gray in the pages of X-Men. But more importantly, is where she met Cyclops, which is what compels Cyclops to start betraying. That all doesn't
and Cyclops
super matter.
Releases her. They end up hanging out together.
Yeah, so Wolverine went in by himself to rescue her, succeeded in rescuing her, took Cyclops' eye out, but Cyclops cut his arm off. So he has like a stump with metal over it.
Wolverine with a stump rules.
It's really cool, and there's a great reveal at the very end, right? So Weapon X here is a book mostly about, initially, because Jean hops around between titles, but it's more about Logan and Jean working for the Human High Council as the Human High Council prepares to nuke Manhattan, which is Apocalypse's base of operations, and end Apocalypse forever. Jean isn't down with the nuclear plan because it's going to kill lots of innocent people, and the Human High Council is like, listen, we got to take out mutant Hitler who's immortal. Sorry.
We're there's a little bit past it at this
we've
point.
kind of run out of options, and the people who are going to die, quite honestly, probably a mercy if they're living under the boot of Apocalypse in the breeding pits. So we're not feeling super bad about it.
They have a lot of stuff that's going on with this. They have a bit of the exile from Manhattan because the Human High Council does work with the X-Men to get as many humans and sympathetic mutants away from Manhattan before they blow this up as possible. But then, oh, by the way, you know who would show up? It's the Pretty Boys.
The Reavers.
They call themselves Pretty Boys here.
But yes. Pretty...
It's Donald Pierce and his friends.
The Reavers are bad, obviously. They are working for Apocalypse, which is interesting to me because Donald Pierce hates mutants in
He's just
our
doing
reality.
It for kicks.
Yeah.
He's just like, oh, I want to
so
be evil.
Scary in Age of Apocalypse. Like, he is fully...
He's not a dandy in this
no,
one. He is.
It's like
he is.
Just a crazy cyborg monster.
He is. They wrote to Adam Kubert, go have fun with this one.
Yeah,
Just
have fun with
silly
this one. So Jean ends up leaving to warn people about the nuke because she's just not down, and Logan can't bring himself to kill her, so he lets her go. Mariko, like a helicopter or a plane, right? Whatever. It doesn't. Yeah, she's like, kill me quick if you're gonna do it, and he won't do it, so she flies away. And then a bunch of Apocalypse operatives, including the Reavers, but also like Box and Copycat. Like, I love the weird pulls in Age of Apocalypse of just like characters who show up.
A bunch of weird ones show up. Can I tell you my favorite pull in this?
Yeah.
It caught me. I forgot this happens in it. In the first issue of this, one of the first antagonists to show up is Magma, who immediately gets stabbed and dies.
Magma
one page.
In this reality is a gigantic flop, like a bigger flop than she's Apocalypse's assassin. She tries to kill Brian Braddock, and Logan just claws her in the back, and she dies instantly. Great. She goes, my life means nothing, more will come. And I'm like, your life truly does mean nothing, Magma, because you were in and out in about 4 panels.
It was, I cackled. I had forgotten how quickly she gets taken out.
So after Jean abandons them, Logan is having some moments with Mariko that are nice. We learn that in this reality, she and Logan still were close in some way, but it appears that they never had a romantic relationship.
They never had a secret love baby, for sure.
Right. Yeah. So, well, they didn't have a secret love baby in our reality either.
They didn't, but they do actually have a secret love baby in the Age of Apocalypse.
Oh, is that in one of the follow-ups?
Yes. It's
is that Kirika?
Yeah, that's Kirika, buddy.
Right.
That's Age of Apocalypse.
Age of Apocalypse X-23 is a biological daughter with Mariko. I forgot about that.
Yeah, that's in the 2005 10-year anniversary Age of Apocalypse story. I don't know how you could forget the story where we meet Age of Apocalypse Zorn.
Well, and yeah, I haven't forgotten that part because it ruins Gen Next, which was...
It does.
Which is just astounding. And then also features Age of Apocalypse Betsy suddenly, who is Asian.
She's just a ninja.
Anyway, after Jean abandons...
Jean abandons Logan.
Yes, and Logan goes to Mount Wundagore for reasons. And it turns out that the reason is because he needs to meet up with Carol Danvers. Well, I guess that's not why he goes. It doesn't.
But he ends up.
But he ends up there. Carol's there, and we meet Gateway, who in this universe is super chatty because he was brought to America by anthropologists. In a sort of sinister thing that is just not elaborated upon. It's like, oh, okay. But so Carol's been watching Gateway on Mount Wundagore as Gateway tries to become the repository of all human knowledge before it's wiped out by Apocalypse. Sure. Meanwhile, back at the Human High Council base, everyone's like, Brian sure seems crazy lately, huh? Just me? Anybody else feel like Brian's going a little crazy?
He is trying to destroy the world.
Yeah, he's let's do all the nukes.
Yeah. It turns out that Brian Braddock is being possessed.
Has been possessed by... It's a really abrupt thing in the 4th issue where it's like Donald Pierce reveals that Apocalypse... Like first it's like, Brian Braddock is the traitor among you, and he is, but then it's like, because we implanted something in his head that's been affecting his mind. And he's like, Emma, I tried to resist it. But then as he dies in her arms, he goes, but I was only human.
Listen, it's some Larry Hama writing right there.
It's good, honestly. It's pretty good. Carol dies fighting the Reavers, and then... Gateway decides, okay, I'll come with you to help the Human High Council. And that leads into the 4th issue where Carol comes back now as a Reaver and controlled by Donald Pierce. And she has to beg Logan to kill her, which is like classic Logan stuff.
It's every love interest at this point.
Yeah, so I like Age of Apocalypse Carol, though. She's fun.
She's great. She's got the face tattoos like everyone needs to have an Age of Apocalypse. She wears a baseball cap.
And her face tattoo is like the Ms. Marvel domino mask, which I think is cool.
It's cool. I like that Carol gets a moment to remember that, she was an X-Men character for a while.
Right. And like this is Carol at her most like I'm a fun X-Men character vibe. Like, when she was living in Rogue's head, or when she was a ghost that haunted Wolverine during the Siege Perilous era, or all of that stuff.
Fun is the word I would use to describe this Weapon X. It's very much in the Larry Hama vein of not planning 1 or 2 panels ahead of what he was scripting at the time. And I love that.
No, it is just a twist every 3 pages, but every time I'm like, sure. Like, I never have a problem with it, He hits
a beautiful synthesis of being able to ride out those weird changes.
Yeah, and the Human High Council scenes are all really fun to me. It has like that Game of Thrones, Succession, Immortal X-Men kind of vibe of like, here's a scene of a bunch of people talking to each other, which I always enjoy in a comic book. It's like a Hellfire Club meeting. It's like that kind of vibe, which I always dig. And it's a good showing for Emma in a way that sort of predicts the more heroic Emma that we're about to get over the course of the rest of the 90s. So that's cool.
It's... a lot of people overlook the Wolverine books and a thing. And you know what? I like this one. I think this one's fun.
I think it's really good.
You shouldn't miss it. It's very 90s.
It's extremely 90s. But like, here's the thing. If I'm going to read a 90s Wolverine comic, I'm going to meet it where it lives. I'm not going to ask it to be something that it's not. And I'm going to rate it as a 90s Wolverine comic, not like, I'm not going to compare it to Life Death, because that isn't what it is. You know what I mean? So for what it is, I think this is a really great 90s Wolverine comic.
It is. I don't think it's the greatest 90s Wolverine comic.
No.
I think it is one of the highlights of Larry Hama's time. Like, I think it's better than Factor X.
It is better than Factor X for sure.
I'm trying to think of where it should go then on this list. Is this better than Steal This Planet from New Mutants Annual?
No.
Oh, no, this is... Wait. What annual... That's Annual 1, right?
That's Annual 1, Steal This Planet.
Yeah, okay, I'm not crazy. Yeah. I forgot for a second what that... Yeah, Steal This Planet's better. Do you like this better or worse than at 224 right now is the Howard Mackie Rogue from the 90s?
That's the Belladonna and Kandra, like Thieves Guild stuff. That one's better than this.
I would agree. Do you think this is better or worse than Uncanny X-Men 231, that time that Colossus pretended to be a ghost?
That issue's better than this.
Okay,
I really like that issue.
It's a good issue. How do you feel about this?
That's the last one Annie Nesenti edited before Bob Harris took over.
That is the last one.
Mm-hmm.
Huh. How do you feel about this compared to Age of Apocalypse 1 through 4 and Uncanny X-Force 19.1? That is the start of the Latham Age of Apocalypse.
This is better than that.
Okay, so we have found the right... Is this better or worse than Earthfall, the Brood Outback story?
That's better than this.
Okay.
Justice for Hanakan over the Brood Queen. One day she may enter heaven.
Yeah, I mean, listen. When God in all his kingdom sings, will the Brood Queen not be among her number?
God's in his heaven, the Brood Queen's in her heaven, and all's right with the world.
Folks, if you don't have any idea what we're talking about...
Don't worry about it. Just don't.
Fine.
It's fine. Don't worry about it. But I'll tell you, this Jerry Duggan Kelly Thompson Brood arc in X-Men and Captain Marvel, every time the Brood Queen gets listed, I'm like, will she finally get to heaven? It's all I want. It's all the people want to know.
I look at a picture of the Brood Queen at the gates of heaven every day in my office.
It is just, it delights me endlessly, and I hope they let Chris write it. I really do. These historical minis that Chris has been doing, I think they're great. The Gambit, the new Extreme X-Men, they're insane, but they're wonderful.
Insane. They are,
but I'm loving them. Like, let's give us Chris Claremont's Brood Queen miniseries. I would read it.
That I would buy. I would buy that in a heartbeat. Is this better or worse than all new Wolverine Orphans of X?
This is better than that.
Okay. So that's where it goes, right between those two stories at our new 244. It is AOA Weapon X.
That works for me.
Okay, good. It's my list.
Is Orphans of X the red right hand or the one with Wolverine's...
It's the fake red right hand.
Right. Okay. Yeah. I mean, I didn't especially like either, but I was trying to remember which one.
Ball art. That's the part that works for me.
Beautiful gowns. I'm not denying that it has great gowns.
This is a safe space to say that you did not like the Tom Taylor Wolverine as much as some people did. We have already bridged that gap on
I didn't. I mean, I will say it made me like Laura more because I came into Laura with NYX, so I had a real bad taste in my mouth about that character for a really long time. And then, Academy X didn't do a ton to make me more... Neither did Kyost X-Force. So it was...
Kyost X-Force wasn't your jam? I cannot believe that.
I know. It's like shocking that book just wouldn't be my cuppa, right? I mean, I do enjoy Necrosha.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Because it's camp. It's just like stupid, but in a way that I enjoy.
It's a lot. There's one last book that's a lot here. It is the last of the main Age of Apocalypse
and
stories.
This one's my favorite, which I told him at the beginning, and he was shocked.
It's just because it's a mess.
Oh,
that's
fully. But here's the thing about me, and this is just a fact. 90s Warren Ellis comics. I love that shit. And obviously he has behaved badly, and there's an ongoing conversation about that. But the point is, before I knew about any of that bad behavior, all I knew was that he was one of my favorite writers of the 90s, because 90s comics are not super my jam, but like I love Hellstorm, the completely insane Damon Hellstrom book that he did. I loved and subscribed to Ellis Excalibur, which does not hold up a ton on reread, I have discovered.
It's a clunky book.
It is just not very good. But here's the thing that's important for people to know now, if you were not a child in the 90s who loved Excalibur. The Scott Lobdell Excalibur is one of the worst comics imaginable coming off of the Alan Davis run.
Truly horrid.
So for Ellis to come in and Excalibur to suddenly be pretty good again made it feel like the sun had come out and like everything was going to be fine. Plus lots of Amanda Sefton content, a little bit of Margali Sardish content, lots of Pete Wisdom, who, like, yes, the relationship with Kitty is inappropriate, but I was a child, so I didn't realize that. And also,
no one realized it.
Well, Warren Ellis didn't realize it because he thought that Kitty was a college student by then, and editorial didn't point out that she was actually 16, so she's just not anymore. Doesn't really matter. The point is, I was subscribed. Like, the one title that came to my house because I cut the thing out of the comic and sent it in was that I got Excalibur to my house every month. So I also got X-Calibre when whereas the other Age of Apocalypse things, I would like pick them up if I was at the pharmacy or whatever, the newsstand, but like Excalibur came right to my house. And the most important thing that I can explain to anybody who wants to understand is that Excalibur stars a character called Damask. And Damask is serving beep every minute of this miniseries.
I have so much of this, and our reaction to this character has now made our reaction to this book make complete sense.
Yeah, I love her. I long to give her 616 version the code name and like make her an actual villain that people use. I think this character rules. So if you are not here for the emancipation of Damask, which is the larger character arc over the course of Excalibur, I would understand being like, what the fuck is this?
Why? I just don't understand why this Excalibur book, by issue 3, half of the team is just random characters that no one has ever cared about.
That don't exist. I mean, like, that's the thing that's fascinating. Right. Like, Switchback and Damask are both entirely new characters who have not... Like, the premise of Age of Apocalypse is, here is the twisted versions of all of our friends, except Warren Ellis is like, oh, I think I'm just going to invent some of my own, and just does, and, like, doesn't give a shit. Switchback has never appeared under a 616. When I was reading it at the time, because I was subscribed to Excalibur, I thought she was supposed to be Pete Wisdom's boss from Black Air, who is also a mysterious platinum blonde. But if she is, they never make the connection.
Mysterious platinum blondes, however, are just like
dime a dozen particularly in Excalibur. Yeah, like you've got. I mean, that's it. It was, if you told me Switchback was the Age of Apocalypse's Courtney Ross, I would completely buy it. Except that she's a mutant. Switchback is cool, though. She has the power to rewind her own personal timeline by a couple seconds to a minute, which
it's the power thing from Galaxy Quest.
Yeah, but this is before Galaxy Quest, so good for this comic, in my opinion. But anyway, we should explain the actual plot of Excalibur. We're calling it Excalibur because it's X-Calibre spelled the British way, so R-E.
It's so... of all the titles, this one, like, it walks the line between brilliant and stupid.
It's just stupid enough for me. And it's about Nightcrawler, Kurt Darkulme, who will later be an important character in that book you love, Uncanny X-Force.
I think it has warts. Let's pause it there. I still enjoy it. I can see the problems.
Anyway, long before he is Rick Remender's plaything for a couple years, he is the star of this story, which is about his attempts to get refugees from America to Avalon, the secret tropical paradise that we know as the Savage Land, but which in Age of Apocalypse is Avalon, the haven created by destiny. Mystique, Kurt's mother, whom he has a fraught relationship with, much like in our timeline, is the main person who like coyotes people to Avalon, because she is the only person on Earth who knows what destiny looks like without her mask on.
Right. It's an interesting plot. And
I also love Destiny. Like, that's the other thing about this book. And she'd been dead for a while, so it was super cool that she was alive in this.
And it's just Destiny was a nothing character. She was
also the Savage Land. We're in the Savage Land, and it's
but it's a
cool place that Destiny runs. That's awesome. Cool.
We don't get the quantity of dinosaurs that,
and her adopted son is Doug Ramsey.
Yeah, okay. You know what? The more I'm thinking about this comic, I get why you enjoy this one.
And the whole thing is that they come to Destiny because Bishop has told them all that the timeline's not real, and they need Destiny to confirm it with her power by meeting with Bishop.
Right. But because Magneto is willing to sacrifice his entire reality for the greater good, but he does want to double check on that
before he does it, before they hop into the Macron crystal and do all the whatever.
He's like, can we get Destiny real quick? Yeah.
Yeah. The big resolution in Omega is that Destiny and Ilyana Rasputina, and I forget if there's another one. The people who are dead in our reality they have to sacrifice themselves to the Macron crystal to like reset time or whatever.
Sure.
So whatever. The point is, one of the things that was cool about Age of Apocalypse was these characters who had died really tragically on page suddenly being back. So you have Destiny, who is here. You have Doug, who is with Destiny, and Raven is so jealous that Destiny has this adopted son that she didn't know about. There's lots of stuff subtextually here in Raven and Irene's relationship that's also interesting if you were invested in that, which I was. I was the one on the playground trying to convince the other kids that Mystique had a girlfriend, which was just like a real uphill battle. If you want to read more about that, I have an essay from last year's Pride trade paperback where I talk about that experience.
That's the Marvel Voices Pride. Go check it out.
But so the bottom line is they're there to get Destiny to come back and communicate this. There's also a cool, her like ascetic follower is Juggernaut, who has become like Brother Kane.
I love Juggernaut
and has
as a monk
declared himself like a peaceable, like he refuses to do violence. And toward the end of the story, when he has to do violence, he has such a conflict over it that he has an aneurysm and dies, which is just a really great. I think it's great.
It walks the very fine line between brilliant and stupid for me.
Yeah, but I mean, I think it lands on the right side. And it's also super grim. Like, Callisto shows up as a pirate at one point, and the refugees who Nightcrawler has been trying to ferry, she kills all of them. She's
been killing a lot of people.
They all die of hypothermia when they are vented into the sea. It is really dark. The name X-Calibre, we learn, comes from Mystique's bullets, which have X's carved into them.
She made custom bullets.
But also the submarine they're using is called the Excalibur, spelled like the regular book Excalibur.
Yeah, it's they were really forcing this title in there.
It's fine. I don't care.
Nightcrawler was the lead of Excalibur at the time.
He was at the time,
so
and
it's
the Nightcrawler book, and it makes sense. And everything else about it is just build an Age of Apocalypse story around Nightcrawler. It doesn't have anything else to do with Excalibur. Brian Braddock's in Weapon X. Like, it's not.
There's nothing else. Excalibur.
And Kitty's in Gen Next.
Doug.
Like, so
I guess Doug was a player in Excalibur
at the time, right? But it wasn't really Doug. But we didn't know that yet. So it was right. So.
The Pale Riders go after him.
Yes, Apocalypse's assassins, the Pale Riders. Well, actually, first, and this part sucks. First, Kurt goes to see the Ghost Dance, which is John Proudstar's Native American underground railroad that ferries people to Avalon, right? And I can't help but love that because it reminds me of the appropriative Ghost Dance that Warpath teaches everyone in Kyo's X-Force in Necrotia to defeat Selene.
It throws me off so hard when I read this in 1995, and like Warren Ellis, at least he looked at what historically the words ghost dance meant.
This actually, yes, no, it's stupid because it's very much a like plot device, mystical Native American thing that's happening here. But unlike the Necrosia one, where it's a really stupid plot device, mystical Native American thing, here it's actually grounded in the historical nature of the ghost dance, which is interesting. And in like the idea of this Native American community refusing, even though Proudstar is a mutant, to ally themselves with Apocalypse because they see him as an oppressor. And that, I think, is really cool.
It's a great idea. It doesn't
Unfortunately, they've been infiltrated by Danny Moonstar of the Pale Riders, who in the Age of Apocalypse reality is a full-on psychopath.
In Yet of the Pale Riders, like, she is not the most psychopathic of them.
I disagree, actually.
Damask does stab Danny in the face when she gets a little too annoying.
Because Danny keeps carving into Deadpool and watching him heal, and Deadpool thinks that they're like best friends, and Danny is just torturing him relentlessly for kicks, and Damask finds it irritating.
It's not, she doesn't find it morally
It's not that it's morally bad. She's just
annoyed by this
child. You're annoying. Right. Damask has the power of psionic skinning, which means that she creates blades of psychic energy that she can use to peel the layers of your mind like an onion, causing you permanent damage to your brain with her psychic assault. And because of her defensive blades, she is completely immune to all telepathy. She is all in with Apocalypse because she is the prized pupil of the Shadow King, who is the only telepath, otherwise, like traditional telepath, because she's not otherwise a telepath. She's not reading minds or anything. Because Karma's also around because you can possess people, but like you can't, no mind readers were allowed. And so the Shadow King is the only one, and Damask was his like prized pupil. So when they get to Avalon, she has a complete nervous breakdown because she sees humans and mutants living in harmony as part of Destiny's dream, which is like,
she realizes flowers exist. And
that like she's never seen flowers before. She's never because Apocalypse's America is like a hyper industrialized wasteland. Yeah,
it's literally with like a
it's Blade Runner, you know, like it's all of that. So
I feel like Blade Runner's a nicer place to live.
Blade Runner has some flowers in it, but you get what I'm saying. It's all of those it's Shadowrun, it's all of those like cyberpunk dystopias. So she sees the beauty of nature and the ability of people to be kind to one another, and she's like, oh my god,
we can do that.
Yeah, she's like, I've been fucking up my entire life. And so she immediately betrays the Pale Riders, kills Deadpool, and switches sides and joins X-Calibre. And I love it. I eat it up. I love this crazy woman. She fights the Shadow King and she psionically skins him into complete catatonia because the student has become the master now, Farouk, and it fucking whips.
If I was invested in her story, in her journey, I would agree with you.
This is her only story, but I am invested in it. She later turns up in our reality as Mrs. Steed, the Black Queen of the London Hellfire Club. Later,
oh my gosh, she does.
Yeah, and then Mockingbird fought her in one of those Mockingbird solos recently, which was like a real deep pull. It was the London Hellfire Club.
I did not read that.
I read that because Damask was in it, and I gotta.
I love that for you. I'm so happy for
named
you.
her Emma Steed as like an Emma Peel and John Steed joke, but you can't have two queens of the Hellfire Club named Emma. I think that's confusing. So if I were ever to get the chance to just fix that, I would call her Diana Steed after Diana Rigg, who played Emma Peel. But you know, what are you going to do? Those are from the Avengers, the British, for people listening.
The one Chris Claremont really liked, and then
the one that Chris Claremont watched as an impressionable child and built his entire sexuality on. God bless him. Which lots of men his age did. Diana Rigg shaped an entire generation of young men.
Diana Rigg, y'all know that Kate Bishop with the hip cutout thing. Diana Rigg was doing that in the 60s.
In the 60s. And she also, at one point, dresses up in a corset and bondage gear to infiltrate an evil, nefarious sex cult called the Hellfire Club, starring actor what's his name Wingard. So
Right.
it's like it's very Anyway, all that to say, I love this story, but I understand that you're not going to rank it as highly as I am, because my love for it is mostly predicated on the fact that it's full of divas doing hot gay shit that's not gay, but just like makes my gay brain
it's
ASMR
got the vibes.
vibrate.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I get it.
It's a bunch of drag queens in a very 90s insane book where they kill each other and it's fun.
See, that's the beauty of the Age of Apocalypse. There's something for everybody.
Yes, there really is. And I'll tell you, when I was a little gay child receiving this in the mail, I was thrilled.
I'll tell you my opinion of this.
I was nervous because we didn't know at the time that everything was going to come back. Like, they told us this is the X-Men now, and I believed it because I'm 7? So I was very concerned.
There wasn't the same solicit culture that there was. Like, solicits at that time were your comic shop owner got the stuff so he knew what to buy, which is what they were.
Right, or you had to buy Wizard, or you had to buy like the Marvel Previews catalog, which was a physical catalog that you had to order, and I'm not ordering that. I'm a child.
No, it's like give me the ones with Nakano.
I want the ones with the X-Men in them, and especially X-Calibre, because those are my favorites. So I was waiting my whole life for like Damask and Switchback to matter, and then they never did.
Never really got there. I think the story is a little messy in the way that most of Ellis's Excalibur is.
Oh, yeah. It's very of a piece with Ellis Excalibur as a whole, but I think being in his own, not just like in this alternate reality, but in a sector of it that he completely builds himself, makes it work better for me than most of his mainstream Excalibur stuff does, because I find that a lot of his like regular Excalibur work doesn't jive easily with the X-Men franchise. You know what I mean? That's like happening around it.
How do you feel about this compared to Warren Ellis Excalibur 91, the time they went to that bar?
That's better than this. That's probably his best issue, you know?
That's pretty much, that's where I am looking at that. How do you feel about this, though, compared to Fatal Attractions? The whole of Fatal Attractions. That means the good and the terrible.
Yeah, I was going to say, taken as a whole, this is probably better than Fatal Attractions, but that seems unfair because it's only 4 issues and Fatal Attractions is so many writers and parts of it.
We made the decision about what Fatal Attractions was 6 years ago. We are not changing now.
Okay, if we have to include all of Fatal Attractions in one, then this is better than that.
Is this better than the wedding of Kitty and Colossus?
In X-Men Gold?
Yes.
So,
it's your boy
here's
Googs.
what I'll say. Marky Mark Googs. Googity Goog. Love that guy. Hate X-Men Gold.
Bad book.
Here's the problem. I hate the wedding of Kitty and Colossus, except for the way it ends in the last page. But everything else about it, I'm like, God. So I think I enjoy this more. And it wasn't going to end with her rejecting him at the altar until Donny Cates randomly suggested that in a meeting.
But I have historically had a lot of qualms with Donny Cates' writing, and yet I will always forgive the man.
Donny Cates will always have a shooter in me because he prevented that marriage from taking place. He
stood up and said, "That's dumb. Can we do something else?"
He said, "Can we do something where they don't get married?" And I'm like, "Thank God that someone in the room
Kitty
said
Pride
that for the rest of time." Much. Yeah. So, I would say I like this better than the wedding of of a Kitty and Colossus because I only like the end of it.
How do you feel about it compared to that time that Juggernaut thought he killed Dazzler on accident?
That's better. That's better than this.
What is Annual 18? I have no idea. Uncanny Annual 18. That is the one 1994 annual where they go into the Morlock tunnels with a captured Sabretooth. This is better than that. This
is way better than that.
Okay, great. Then this is our new 269. Perfect.
Okay. Chic.
I am so glad that we could get through this. I am glad that, you know what? I know a lot of these stories. Sometimes people send in stories as like, "Oh, this was my favorite story as a kid," and then me and Adam have to sit there and say, "You had terrible taste as a child."
Right? Yeah. No.
I'm glad that there is someone who can enjoy this one.
My favorite that's happened to me on that score is when Fabian was on Fabian Nicieza, for the listeners if they're not familiar, was on
My personal
show.
best friend, Fabian Nicieza, yeah.
I just call him Uncle. I call him Uncle Fabes at this point. We're just close like that. But I was just talking about how much I loved Revanche and how much I loved that whole storyline. He was like, I think it's adorable that you care. And because he was like, people come up to me at my sightings and I'm just like, that's the worst piece of shit I ever wrote, but I'll sign it for you. And that's a great attitude to have, I think.
Fabian Nicieza does not have a lot of preciousness.
I was going to say, he's not precious. Marvel. He's not precious about his work for hire. No.
There is stuff he's proud of.
New Warriors, he's pretty precious about, I would say. But that's the one.
New Warriors is very long. And if I haven't started it now, it's going to be a while.
I just got the Volume 2 Omnibus. I think I've got all the Niciez's stuff now in hardcover, which most of it I haven't read. But here's the problem. The hoi polloi decided I have to care about Firestar now. So now I've got to do a fucking Firestar episode at some point, which means even though this is not a New Warriors podcast, I feel like I got to read some key issues, right?
Yeah, you got to read New Warriors and you got to read Avengers.
It is like, I've read the Busick Avengers. I've read the Busick Avengers. So that part I had already read. That's why I don't like her ass. Because she and Justice suck.
But you do get to read Marvel Divas, where she gets canceled.
I have read Marvel Divas, love Marvel Divas. I have an elaborate fantasy in which I am tapped to write Marvel Divas Volume 2.
I cannot imagine Marvel Divas Volume 2 existing.
Ever. But if it did, I want to write it.
More power to you. More power to you.
So Marvel, if you're listening, that would be a fun Infinity comic.
Again, I mean, like, TM, do not steal. They'll figure it out.
Yeah, I'm just saying. Anyway.
Connor, if people enjoyed all of the excitement and energy that you brought to the Age of Apocalypse this week, where can people find you and everything you do?
I am the host of the podcast Cerebro, which is a weekly deep dive on every X-Men character with more than 12 appearances, which is a complete Zaladane. We do a different character every week. I have a guest every week who is relevant to the character's experience or who just loves the character or whatever else. We have a lot of fun. It's very long.
Yeah, folks,
but it's in segments.
Every time Connor's on here, it's like a little bit of a longer episode. That's because we're reining it in.
Right. I'm really working hard on this show but like Cerebro tends to run 3+ hours. But it's in segments that you can divvy them up. I'm very proud of it. It's taken off in a way I really did not anticipate at all, but I love what I do, and I hope you'll check it out if you'd like to. You can find everything about it at cerebrocast.com. You also can find out about my work generally at connorgoldsmith.com. I am a literary agent in the comic space. My best known clients are probably Teenie Howard and Steve Orlando, but I do mostly work in sci-fi, fantasy, horror. My most recent big client novel was Manhunt by Gretchen Felker Martin, which I'm extraordinarily proud of, and I'm extremely proud of Gretchen, and I hope people will check that out if you like horror or apocalyptic dystopian nightmares like the Age of Apocalypse.
It is on my to read list.
It's a rough one though, just for the listeners.
Bud,
I sold it, and there are pages where I have to go ooh,
I love rough ones.
But yeah, and then the rest of my work is mostly nonfiction. I work with a lot of Bravo reality talent, some of the Real Housewives, that kind of stuff. So it's an eclectic life that I lead, but basically I've found ways to turn all of my obsessive interests into things that theoretically make me money, and that is what I think all people should do if they can.
So you're living the dream.
Hopefully. I mean, I could be making more money. That would be nice. But we'll see how it all comes together. But yeah, so just check it out, cerebrocast.com, Cerebrocast on Twitter and Instagram. You can follow me on Twitter at Dream of Organon, but I don't really use it very much anymore because Twitter sucks now. And that's about it. Thank you so much, Zack, for having me. Zack did an episode of Cerebro and Nate Gray. That's a ton of fun. It's the only one he hasn't listened to because he's a weirdo.
I went back and listened to it.
Did you? Isn't it good? what? It's really good.
I went back and I was like, okay, that's fine. See, I tell everybody who, like, someone will bring up, and I'm sure you've seen this happen with your show. Someone will bring up, oh, do you remember this thing you said? And you're like, no, I don't remember this at all. I lived it.
At this point, recording episode 96 this week of a really long show, yeah, I have forgotten most of it. But I also just have bad long-term memory. Like, people I've known for 20 years, they'll be like, remember in high school when you... And I'm like, no, I simply don't. Like, my mind has cleaned that out to protect me. So I barely remember things I did last week. So it's just not... It's an ADHD lifestyle that I just can't really, But anyway, thank you for having me. This was super fun. It was fun to talk about the AOA because I almost never do. And it was fun to sing the praises of Damask. So I appreciate the opportunity.
I'm glad you were able to come on, folks. If you want to follow the show, you don't know how to do that. Adam will be back next week. And we are going to be talking about...
And you're missed, Adam. Adam was supposed to be here. I thought I was going to get the full experience, but something came up.
He's doing all right. Just had a conflict.
He just has such a pleasant radio voice, and I always enjoy.
Listen, it's half of the reason why I tolerated editing this podcast for so long. But next week, folks, you're gonna stay out of the 616, and we're moving into a beautiful world that is the world of the year 2099. Until then, folks. It's not. Until then, folks.
16.
We hope you survive the experience. It's 616.
Get it!